All right, so we are going to be analyzing our data with PivotTable in our training, Excel in Business Data Intelligence. Before we delve into what PivotTable is, let's just take a recap at what we have been trying to do. We got this question, a business data that we got from an organization located or operating in 3 states. These were the data submitted to us. And during the course of the previous sessions, we were able to transform this text-based data into this format using Excel features to transform this data. And finally, we transformed this into a table, an official table recognized by Excel. And thereafter, we proceeded to use Power Query to flip each of these tables around to arrive at these Power Queries. So we had this for Rivers, we had this for Bayelsa, and then we did for Akwa Ibom, and we eventually merged the 3 queries into what we call all state query. All right, so at this point, we would like to now use PivotTable to run our analysis. Now let's look at the question that we are hoping to answer. So from those 3 different sales from the 3 states, we want to find out if there are trends either at the state level or at the national level. And then from the trend, what prescription can be given to improve performance, whether we want to do the intervention at the state level or at the national level. So we'll be able to identify trend and see what we can do when we analyze. And so we are going to be using PivotTable to run the analysis. Now, let's go back to PivotTable. 2 basic things we would like to discuss on PivotTable before we start creating one is what is PivotTable. Now, from our analysis, from our definition, is a statistic tool that summarizes and reorganizes your columns and rows if your data is presented in a spreadsheet. We also say that the tool, it does not actually change the spreadsheet or the original data itself. Rather, it provides you with the opportunity to view the data from different perspectives. It's a very important tool in most analytic tools that you can see, programs and apps. Okay, so anyone can use PivotTable to look at the data in a number of ways. So that's in a very short definition. That's what PivotTable is. And with the help of PivotTable, we can run analysis, and different analysis that we can run include summarizing the data with PivotTable. You know, when you analyze, you can summarize from your analysis. You can do sorting in your analysis. When you sort, you want to see if the data has a specific order of presentation. You may decide to rank them from lowest to highest, depending on where you are putting your sorting criteria. You can also filter out some key elements. You want to see if there is a pattern in a particular set of elements. You also want to find out the frequencies of occurrence. How many times does each of the variables occur? You can do your total. There are some extra calculations you can run on PivotTable. Remember, you can run those in, extra calculations without actually changing the original data set. Then you can present your data in a different way by reorganizing them and viewing them from different perspectives, like we said. And again, you can group your data with pivot tables. You group them, you want to find out those ones that occur in this quarter. How do they look like? Can we see them like a group? You can also decide to group your numbers. So those ones that occur between certain numbers, maybe you can use 1,000 if you have a very large data. You want to segment them and say, okay, those that run from 1 to 1,000, I want to see them. Those from 1,001 to another 2,000, you can do that. So there is a whole lot of uses of pivot table. All right, so what we are going to do, we are going to start creating pivot table from the scratch, so that those who may not know how to create pivot table will follow along and learn how to create that. All right, so remember, this is the Power Query that we have created. We created the queries for each of the 3 states, and then we merge them together. Now, following the rules that we had earlier presented concerning the use of pivot table or creating pivot tables, we tried to abide by those rules, which was major reason why we had to employ Power Query to flip around some of the data so that we can put every one of them under the same heading. So in this particular query, we have staff. All the staff are all on this column. The states are here, the sex of the staff, the date that the sales were made, and the values of the sales. Okay, so now when you want to create a pivot table, it's always good to make sure that your data is arranged the way the rules state, and of course try to avoid clustering other data around it. Now with this, we remember that this is an official table, so we have this here, table design, to tell us that this is a table. So what we need to do is to go to insert right from the ribbon here, this tab, and then on the extreme left here, I have pivot table. So when you click that, because we originally placed our cursor inside the table, Excel is already suggesting that the pivot table we want to create is this, and so it has given us suggestion. So we look at this create wizard. It's telling us that the table name is all states. Of course, this is the name of the state of the table, and he's suggesting that we place the pivot table on a new worksheet. Like I always advise, if you are starting new, it's good to always put it on a new sheet. Only when you understand how to operate with pivot tables, what to expect, and know the kind of errors that you will get if data begin to cluster together, and then you don't lose sight of what is happening, then you can actually place them on existing worksheet. So for the purpose of our learning, we are going to go by this choice, and so we are going to click OK. And as soon as we click OK, remember this is the active sheet, so it's going to insert a new sheet just left of the active sheet, and then insert our pivot table. So there we go, we have this. So we can do a lot of pivoting to see the presentations and whether we love them. If we love them, fine. If we don't like them, we spin them around, pivot them around, turn them around, and see different things we can view. Now, so let's come to these pivot table fields. There are basically 4 key fields here. Right here is the filter field. Next to it on the right is the columns. Just below the column is the values. And next on the left of the value and right under the filter is the rows. Now on this is where we have the headers of our table. So you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are basically 5 headers. Now let's go back to the main table, Akwa Ibom here. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those are the 5 headers represented there. And each of the headers has entry fields. For instance, the staff is a header, and every entry under that header is text values. The names of the staff are text values, they are not numbers. State, the same thing, they are text numbers. Sex, text numbers. However, date is a value, and then sales is numbers. Date is number, sales is number. Now, when I just check any of this header here, if what I am checking, if the field I am checking contains text, by default, it brings it here under the rows. So we are going to look at those headers that have text fields and see what happens to them. So this is staff. So it's bringing all the unique staff. So these are all the unique staff in our data set. Let's check state again. State is a text, and so it's going to be in the row here. Now, bringing it under row here is also letting us see how the staff are arranged at the state level. You see Albert, because the first field that we selected was the staff field, so it's on the top here. And so we have Bayelsa under it, Chris is under Bayelsa, Debbie is under Rivers, and so on and so forth. Now let's go ahead and check sex. Still a text field, and it's going to come under the state. So under the state, it has assigned the sex for each staff, the sex status for each staff. So for Albert, Albert is in Bayelsa and is a male. For Chris, Chris is in Bayelsa and in male. Now, when you want to analyze based on certain criterion, you may pull around the order of this. Say for instance, I want to look at the number of or the different staff in each state. So what I am looking at is I want to see the state first, and I'll see the different staff in each state. So I can click, hold, and drag this up. I have my state. So in Akwa Ibom state, I have Helene, who is a female. I have James, who is a male. I have Joanne, who is a female, and so on and so forth. So the entire staff here are under Akwa Ibom. And you can also see the order, the indent level. And then right inside, against each entry, you have this symbol here telling you you can expand or you can collapse. So where you see plus, that means there is still something hidden. So you click and open it, and then it turns to negative, which means nothing else is there. All right. So what about numbers? Let's see. If we click number, by default, they come under value here. And then what it will give is sum. So let me check this. And then it comes right here. So we have that the sum of sales. And then it's going to attach the sales for each staff. If we open our main table, all the total sales made by Helen is 5124. All the sales made by Peter is 3049. Now let's see what happens to date. When you click date, date comes under this row. And let me use this opportunity to open this. You can actually pull this out, and let's see, we can expand this, expand it. Okay, and when I drag this, I have date here. So even though date is a number, but when you click it, it comes over here. Now these are by default. So let's take this back again. These are by default. If I want to look at, let's say, the sales, I want to see how many times the sales happen, or I want to see how many times did each staff make sales. Now let's see, I'm going to pull this out as I want to get back my pivot table to 0. Now see what we are going to do. Let's expand this a little bit, and rather than carrying the staff, let's put the staff here. So there are 80 entries for each staff. Now I can pull this staff also and drop them here. Now see what happened. My staff was forcefully pulled to the value field, and the value it can give is the count. And so what it's saying is that in our data set, how many times did Albert record sales? So if we were to run analysis and say, okay, how many times did each of these staff submit report? Using pivot table, we can use the count value. The same thing with the sex. Say, take away this, bring your sex here. So we have only male and female. Now let's see how many males and how many females were in our data set. So I bring this here. So there are 35 times that females submitted record, and 45 times that males submitted their report. Remember, we will pull this together out here. When we first pulled the staff, we had 80. So this is the disaggregation of the sex. So in our data set, you may be interested to know, let's see the disaggregation by sex. How many times or which gender submitted more reports? Now, looking at this, we can still go further and say, okay, well, this may be interesting. We might see a trend here. Can we look at the sales made by each of this sex? So let's pull our sales together, bring them right under here. Then we see that the female, they made a sales of 52,900 naira, while the male made 34,878 naira. Now, when you look at this, isn't it striking that only 35 women made more sales than 45 male? So you begin to think, is it that there are more potentials in the female gender? So when you run such analysis, you are able to come up with a trend. You see, we've just run a trend against the male and female genders, and we have seen that something is happening. Now, another thing that we can run again is, can we look at the dates? Is there a trend in business in relation to dates? Are there days that sales are more, or is just the same across? Again, you may want to find out, Are there states that have made more sales? Is there a state that is the highest? If we increase our focus on the state, will that give us better yield? Now let's see. We can, let's say, let's bring in the state now. Bring in the state here. So these are the analysis of the states. So Rivers has more sales, and there is really not much difference between Akwa Ibom and Bayelsa. Okay, this sex, the way it is here, it doesn't give us any insight, no intelligence. That's 25. So what about it? There are no male disaggregation. Okay, so what can we do? Let's pull this out and see. So these are the sales. Now let's look at the date. Now we can pull the date at different times and see what the result will be like. Let's put the date here, for instance. So you see Akwa Ibom made sales like this, and it looks like there is an increase for Akwa Ibom, a gradual increase, you will say, from 3,648 to 4,250, and so on and so forth. There is a gradual increase. Bayelsa, well, between here and here and here, there was a fluctuation. Here, 3987, there is a reduction, there is an increase here, and then there is an increase here, an increase here. Well, it had established some form of trend. And here, yes, also here we have increases. Okay, it's just at this point that we had a dip, and then it shot up again. So when you use your pivot table, you can pivot in different ways and get different perspectives. So this is just an introduction to pivot table. There are a whole lot of other things that we will be looking at. For instance, we can look at ranking, and we will attempt also to look at how we can use pivot table to summarize, to sort, to filter, and see how many of these uses we can actually use pivot table to achieve. All right, so in the next video, we'll be looking at the other aspects of pivot table in terms of the other features before we'll delve into the real analysis. So when we look at this, here, when you click this pivot table analyze option, we are going to be looking at slicers, what they help us to do, timeline, what they help us to do. Here, this refresh, when you change your original data and you want it to reflect on your data, you go over there. And so we are going to be looking at the different features of pivot table. So just go ahead, practice what we have just gone over, and then by the time we go to the next level, you will understand it deeper. Thank you for watching.